Dr. Soliman, welcome to the podcast. Dr. Will Soliman is the founder and CEO of the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, the leader in life sciences, accreditation, certification, and training. The ACMA is the organization that certifies and trains all pharmaceutical industry professionals, as well as prior authorization professionals. Dr. Soliman is also the founder and CEO of White Mana Capital Partners, a biotech and pharmaceutical-focused hedge fund. Dr. Soliman is considered a pharmaceutical industry futurist, and in March 2021, he testified before the United States Congress Health Subcommittee about the pharmaceutical industry and the importance of professional standards for those who directly engage healthcare providers like sales representatives. Dr. Soliman is a former pharmaceutical executive who held leadership roles at several big pharma companies, including Merck, AbbVie, and Gilead. He is routinely featured on media outlets such as News Nation, Fox News, ABC, Forbes, Al Jazeera, Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Business TV, and more. Dr. Soliman received his PhD from Columbia University and his bachelor's degree from New York University. That is one intro, Doctor.
It's a mouthful, yeah. I appreciate you going through that.
Well, let's jump right into it. So how did you find yourself in the pharmaceutical industry?
It was a girl, actually, that I dated. And I started out as a teacher, actually. When I first came out of college, I actually, it's a funny story. I worked at M&M Mars, you know, the chocolate company. Mm-hmm. But I worked in the actual corporation out in Hackettstown, New Jersey, in the factory where they make the chocolate. I was a scientist there, and while I was there, I was dating a girl. She worked for Eli Lilly, pharmaceutical company, and she was like, you know what, you would be great in pharmaceuticals. So that's how I learned about it. It was really through her, and never ended up marrying her, but she played a role in my life in getting me a job.
How are you guys today? Just out of curiosity, did you guys talk here and there?
Nah, I haven't talked to her for probably 20 years. I'm married now, and I think keeping in contact with an ex when you're married is a bad idea.
Well, yeah, of course, but that's what life's all about. Not everyone you're going to encounter is supposed to be an all or nothing.
Yeah.
Relationships can be like an ex. You're both in two different paths. You meet up, you give each other value you need to do, and then you guys move on with your lives. Yeah. And it clearly gave you perspective, and it shaped your life in an interesting way. But let me ask you this: when you were in college, and you mentioned you were in Columbia University, did you plan to head into this direction, and I think you mentioned it was a little bit by surprise given your ex, but what was your plan from day one, just out of curiosity?
Honestly, my plan was to be a biochemist or a chemist. That was what I was thinking to do. I thought about working in a lab, because back then, this is now, you're looking at late 90s, early 2000s. The internet was just coming up. It was hard to get information, and these types of jobs, no one knew about them. So it was difficult to even know this was an opportunity that existed. So I was just thinking I was going to work at a chemical company. I worked at M&M Mars as a food scientist. That's what I was going to do. And then, like I said, as I learned more about pharmaceuticals, that's kind of what ended up getting me into that space by just people that had worked there, like this girl.
Yeah. We're in this inflection point where, I guess I'll take a step back and say that a lot of the technology we see today is inspired from biology. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can just look at a computer, it's got its input-output peripherals, and it mimics a human being as much as possible. We look at a bird, we study its dynamics, we rebuild it with ideal materials, and we go to different planets.
Right.
And I do believe biology and technology has this weird symbiotic relationship. And to some extent, we're passing this baton of life from biology to technology when you look at it in a broader picture. And these two fields were somewhat separated for a while, where to have a really good discipline in biology, you needed to be really good at biology, chemistry, and all that.
Yep.
But now you're seeing this explosion where they're just literally just confronting one another, and it's pushing the industry in a very unique place. So you have the moniker of a futurist. Where do you see this industry heading in a macro perspective?
I know this is going to sound cliche. You probably hear this a lot, but I think AI is going to transform this industry. It already has, but I think AI, we're just at the beginning point. I know you're a software engineer by background and developer, but I'm sure you can appreciate this even more than me. But what I see happening in the world AI, it's moving at lightning speeds. Like, a
Yeah.
few weeks ago, I learned about organoids, with AI, and how, you can basically take electrodes, attach them to brain tissue, and get the organism to play Pong. Like it was able to teach the organism how to play Pong, that 70s game. So that's crazy to me. The fact that
Yeah.
there's this interface between technology and biology, now in the lab, that's insane. So I think, in the future, what we're going to see is more reliance on AI. I mean, we're already seeing it now to develop drugs, to do computational biology.
Right.
And we're doing it, at my company, at the ACMA, we offer now, even when it comes to the training and certification that we use, it's all AI driven. So I think this is like the next revolution, almost like there was like the industrial revolution back, 70, 80 years ago. It transformed the world. I think it's going to be the same situation now.
I think it's going to be orders of magnitude more significant
Yeah, agreed.
because, I mean, our growth initially was subject and confined by Moore's law, where you had the amount of transistors defined by the amount of transistors on an integrated circuit doubling every 24 months. I think we're losing grip of that, and I think our predictive power of where things are going is fleeting. You're able to go to college 10 years ago and say, hey, what jobs pay the best, hone in
Yeah.
on a set of skills, and have some predictive power of what the economy would be like when you get out of it. And I think we're losing touch of that.
Yeah.
I think now, you're saying how AI has transformed the industry. AI has just been around. I mean, the first NLP that had some sort of success has been out for like a year or two, and you're saying, oh, things are, we're all saying things are going to come out in a year or two. It's no longer a year or two or a decade. We're talking like weeks and months.
Yeah.
So I think that's absolutely wild. And I have a kind of an interesting question to ask you, because, you're somewhat at the forefront of these industries. We want to live longer. We want to live healthier lives. We look at our biology and we say, hey, how can we attack the bottleneck? How can we optimize our state of living? Do you feel the question is going to somewhat change of like, how do we optimize this biology to how do we replace this biology? And it's a conversation of cyborgism. And I know it kind of sounds a little futuristic, but it truly isn't. I mean, we're looking at our biology, and I talked about an analogy earlier about a bird, right? The wings on a bird are not the ideal materials for flight. It's what evolution carved out. It's almost like the minimum baseline to survive in their environment. We might start asking the question of, is it worth optimizing this rather than replacing it with something that's a lot more fault tolerant?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of already do that, right? If you think about what we're doing in the world of orthopedics with prosthetics to help people, for example, with spinal issues, we're kind of doing it to some degree. I think probably what you're referring to is like internal organs, right? I mean, the number one killers today in the world, at least in the developed world, is heart disease and cancer. So, when you think about heart disease, could you potentially have some type of, hybrid where it's like a machine heart with some biology and some actual tissue, that you sample from a younger organism, or you can grow with stem cells in the lab? I think that's possible for sure. I think that's possible. I think with cancer, that's more of a cell and gene therapy approach, and that might be a little bit different. But even then, I think AI is going to play a big role. Because see, big part of the problem is trying to source the drugs and how they work to be able to address the disease. I had on my podcast a few months ago this Dr. David Feigenbaum. He's the author of this book, Chasing My Cure. Crazy story. This guy he's an MD from UPenn, super smart, and he got diagnosed with Castleman's disease, this rare disease, and they told him he was going to die. And while he was in the hospital, he did all this research and found a drug that was shelved by a pharma company. It was shelved by a pharma company, and he took it on his own against doctor's orders, and now he's still alive. 10 years later. That's a crazy story. Why I'm bringing that up, though, is to say, imagine if you could use AI, which is what he's trying to do now in his organization, to be able to source and find a lot of different options for treatment. Again, similar to what you're saying about the AI and how quickly it's changing, I think even in the pharmaceutical side, we're just I think, beginning to understand the potential of a lot of the drugs we've developed, what they can be used for, the underlying mechanisms. We still got a long way to go. And so I do think, we'll be able to live longer. Now, the quality of life, that's a different issue. And there's people like Peter Attia, you might have heard of, as a physician, who talks about this cliff after, I think it's 76 or 74 years old. There's something to be said for that. So you can try to maximize the quality of your life to some degree, but, at some point, things begin to break down. Now, whether AI and bio can step in, advanced technology to improve that and mitigate that, that remains to be seen, but potentially.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation in and of itself. But,
Yeah.
you're in the pharmaceutical industry, and I want to ask you this question. The bureaucracy that makes the pharmaceutical industry what it is feels like a double-edged sword, in the sense where they do their best to mitigate long-term effects. There's rigorous clinical trials, but at the same time, it stifles growth to some capacity because you're unable to be agile, nimble, try things quickly, move on quickly. And I kind of want to get your opinion on that. And just like you mentioned, like, found the shelf drug and he found that it helped against the legal safe recommendations of doctors, right? So, and of course with AI, we're going to be able to have a much quicker process in creating proteins and creating molecules that are effective. So, in speaking towards the bureaucracy and the double-edged sword of the pharmaceutical industry, what's your perspective on that? Do you agree with it? Do you think that we should kind of start slashing regulations and just start brute forcing our way through problems?
No, I think you need regulations because otherwise it's the wild, wild west. The problem is that sometimes we're over-regulating in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's where it becomes a problem. I'm a big believer in that you need process, but when there's too much process, to your point, you could stifle things. I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, I had a dinner. I organized this big dinner for all these big doctors, okay? And it was a big dinner, in New York City, nice posh hotel. And when the doctors came into the hotel, for them to know where the dinner was, I had to make sure there was a sign saying the dinner was here. Like, this dinner for this company was here, and then there was like an arrow saying it's downstairs, for example. Can you believe if I tell you, I went back and forth with the compliance department at this pharmaceutical company about that sign, that the sign should not be shown in the corridor. But I was like, well, how the doctor's going to know where to go? And they were like, they just need to look at it on the monitor. They made a huge deal about this sign just because it said speaker dinner and had the name of the company. And that was like a 4-hour conversation. So to me, that's overregulation. To me, that's a bit much. And that does happen in the pharmaceutical industry. But in some cases, you need it because, and this is why our organization, ACMA, exists, because sometimes you have people, I'm not going to lie to you, they don't know what they're doing. People think because you have a PhD, like I have a PhD or someone has an MD, you assume, oh, they know what they're doing. They know how to design a clinical trial. They know how to, interpret clinical data effectively. That's not true.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just because someone's a doctor doesn't mean that, it's almost like a child when they look up to their parent. Like, the parent must always know what's best. The parents must always be right. And that's just a really false, I can't tell you how many times you just speak to another doctor, you get a completely different opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And you speak to a doctor with a different set of skill sets, you get a completely different perspective.
100%.
It's like when you're doing something for 30, 40 years and all you have is a hammer, everything literally looks like a nail.
100%.
And yeah, I mean, exactly. That's the double-edged sword of growth, because sometimes, these rules, these regulations, these protocols protect consumers to a great degree. They prevent bad actors from going rogue. But at the same time, they also prevent people who are dying from different sorts of cancers and they don't have access to well-established medications and they want to head in experimental phase and they've got nothing to lose. It's really unfortunate that they can't tap into a more agile and nimble environment. Now, I kind of want to talk about the bigger picture for a second. So I know you started a hedge fund in biotech and the pharmaceutical industries, and we're all talking about futuristic stuff here and where the industry is going. I'm curious, what areas are you looking to invest in? As in, what areas do you think holds economic value for the future?
Well, I can't reveal like specific details, but what I can tell you is we're looking at what kind of some of the stuff that we're talking about, this interface between AI in the life sciences, and what that could be AI specifically for drug development, or it could be AI tools that are used to support it, from like a third party side, as well as biotech, small to mid-sized pharma. So that's kind of our focus from an investment perspective. We're not interested necessarily today in private early seed kind of startups. We're more interested right now kind of in more public securities, but it's more again biotech mid-size, that interface in AI and the life sciences. That's the focus. And to me that's an interesting endeavor with White Manna Capital, because it's another way to bring innovation to the market, right? And investing and trying to help these companies ultimately bring the drugs to the market. Because I don't know if you know this, but almost half of the time a drug will fail. It will not actually get approved by the FDA. So it's like a gamble.
Yeah,
It's a
and
big
it's an
gamble.
expensive one too.
It's an expensive one too. Yeah, it's a big gamble. It's expensive. And back to the other question you were asking about the regulations and the processes. Another reason I'll tell you that you have some of this is they don't want to get sued. If you're a pharmaceutical company, the last thing you want is, oh my God, a patient died in a clinical trial, especially if it's a woman or a child. I don't know why men have less value sometimes. I've noticed in these clinical trials. Women and children, they're more concerned about. But all kidding aside, I've seen they're very worried about getting sued because it's a reputational risk. If the company has people in the study and the study bombs, and someone especially gets an adverse event or God forbid dies, it's a stain on the company. So they really got to make sure that they're doing the right thing by patients. There's, of course, a lot of protocols to ensure that that's in place for the safety of the patient. So, like I said, I think that's important to maintain that and keep that.
Doctor, tell me about the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, the ACMA. What is it that it does, and why is it uniquely valuable?
I don't know who your audience is out there listening, but when I say this to you, you're going to be shocked. In the 250 years of the pharmaceutical industry, until we came along, we've been around for over 10 years. There was no organization that actually accredited and certified the people that went out and talked to doctors, meaning the pharma reps, the medical science liaisons. We also do the fill reimbursement. That's crazy. Like, I always use the example of when you go to the barber. I don't know how it is in Miami, but in New Jersey, I don't know if there's a lot of barbers in Miami. I know in New Jersey there's a lot of, Italian barbers. And in New Jersey, at least, the barbers, they have to be licensed. You have to have a license. You have to go to school. You have to be licensed. You have to maintain a license to cut someone's hair. But in the pharmaceutical industry, till we came along, there was no accreditation or certification to maintain your knowledge and your standards. And you were going out and talking to doctors. To me, that was nuts, especially after what I saw, at different companies that I worked at. So we established the first ever standards, and today we really are the primary standard for certifying, credentialing all the pharma people in the world, actually. And in the United States, we do all the prior auth people as well. The people that when you go to the doctor, they do all the medical billing and coding and prior authorizations. We're the ones that certify them.
Explain to me what the benefit is accrediting the people in the pharmaceutical industry, as they act as, I guess, imagine liaisons between the scientists and the real world and all the safety regulations. Explain to me why someone would benefit so greatly from using that sort of service.
Because in the end of the day, they're the ones that educate the doctors. When a doctor graduates medical school, the main education that he or she gets is from the pharma industry. So if you have people that are meeting high standards of knowledge, competency, ethics, they're objective, they're not biased, and they're going to a doctor, that's going to mean better health care for patients. And that's important. So,
yeah. Now, tell me a little bit of where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, because it sounds like you do a lot, and it sounds like this industry is changing really, really quickly. And I hope you listen to this in 5 to 10 years and you give yourself a laugh, because you realize how wildly different the future is.
Right.
Give it your best shot.
I mean, look, for me, I would say in the next 10 years, I would love to be able to continue to grow ACMA, and, even do more than just focusing maybe particularly on this in this area of sales, maybe grow to other divisions in pharma, but also I would say, looking at potentially, growing the hedge fund, looking at other endeavors of investment, whether that's, getting larger equity stakes in a biotech or a product, acquiring a product. I could see myself doing that because I obviously have a lot of experience doing that. So I see myself working, continually in the life sciences. It's an area that I'm really passionate about because I've seen that people's lives can change. I really have.
Yeah. For someone else who's trying to help change the lives and make the world a better place, I know you got your PhD from Columbia University, and you have a young and hungry person looking to enter the medical world. What advice would you give to them to get started, to go through the medical process, and what fields would you say, hey, this field was good 5-10 years ago, but I really think, the industry's changing and look into this sort of niche?
Yeah, I would say if you're listening to this and you're interested in this area, I would tell you try to do something where you have a good knowledge in the sciences, even becoming a physician potentially if you have the stamina to do that, but also having some background in AI engineering, or because I think that combination is rare. It's going to be very rare to find people like that. Even today, it's rare. But I tell you, the people that have that is very, very, very valuable. One of the guys that works for me at the hedge fund, he's actually a mix of people he's an MD from Yale, and he also has a background in financial modeling. Again, very unique background. So I think in the future, if you have experience and knowledge like that, that's going to be important. But you know what? I'll tell you something. More important than that is, I think, having good work ethic and staying the course. What I see a lot of people, why they fail, is because they don't have a good work ethic, and they can't handle it. They can't take it. It's like when you hear that saying, you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. A lot of people nowadays are soft. But if you want to work in this industry and be successful, I think in anything, even in your industry, you've really got to be willing to continue to learn, grow. You can't be lazy, and you got to have good work ethic. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Especially now. I mean, listen, how many people I hear now graduate college and they can't get a job for a year and a half. I see it all the time.
Yeah. In order to, we kind of have this, I like to say that, I heard this quote, I don't know who said it, but sometimes science is more art than science.
Yep.
In order to, like you can think of like a processor or a CPU, like to get those transistors packed shorter and shorter, you need engineering, and you need to take the science and the rules that we know work and just push them a little bit further. But to think of something monumentally, ground-shapingly different, you got to think of quantum computers, a completely different artistic approach to solving problems. And I think we're in a place now where you really need to double down on your uniqueness factor. Whatever can give you a unique edge in your industry is so important. So you're so right. It's like these are mutually exclusive industries. People who are studying medical school and the people who are studying computer science and math. And I think maybe getting a minor in something at the other end of the scientific spectrum just gives you a complete edge. Like think of going to medical school and having a minor in computer science. That just puts you, because I took my chemistries and I took my biologies, and I remember my fellow students who were like A+ students in biology, they were crying over Calculus 1.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's all connected. It really is. If you dig deep enough, it's all the same.
100%.
So, yeah. So, doctor, where can people get in touch with you?
So if they go to visit acmalifesciences.org, that's our company site. They could also find me on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube, at Will Soliman or William Soliman. So, I'm pretty readily available on all those channels. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I put a lot of good content out there about pharma and healthcare, anything you want to know about the news, up-to-date news that you're hearing. This year, especially with the Trump administration, a lot going on with the pharma FDA world. So I provide, I think, a lot of valuable information. Hopefully people find helpful.
Great. Well, I wish you much success, doctor, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Michael. It was good talking to you.